Deion Sanders in the news for not a good reason. I think for the most part, most people are having quite negative reactions to this announcement. Deion was really vocal about trying to elevate HBCUs. Um, he was the head coach of Jackson State, went 27-5. He was 12-0 this season thus far, and
won their championship, won the SWAC championship game.
Yeah, he was a huge part of why these 5-star recruits, kids out of high school, made a decision to go to Jackson State as opposed to Alabama or Georgia or Michigan, right? And his son is one of them. That's a whole nother wrinkle. But he's now decided that he's leaving. He is leaving Jackson State. He is going to Colorado to be the head coach.
Go Buffs.
And Colorado is not a good football program.
They were 1-11 this year.
1-11.
Yeah.
And there were other rumors about where he might go because, like, look, his salary at Jackson State was in the mid hundreds of thousands, and he was going to get offered millions to coach another school. Now, he's made a lot of money in his career, but he can make a decision for himself. And it seemed like most people understood that it was inevitable that he would end up leaving Jackson State after kind of promoting the program there and going to a bigger school. Florida State was mentioned as a place that he could go. That would make some sense. There were other schools, and now I'm blanking on it. But schools that, maybe had a little bit more of a black student body than, say, Colorado, which is a historically white university, very much so, and not even a good one. And that's what's shocking.
Yeah, their football team has not been particularly relevant since the mid '90s when Cordell Stewart was their quarterback, and with Mike McIntyre was their coach before he descended into reclusivity. He literally left college coaching to just be a full-time kind of evangelical Christian with his wife.
Okay.
So that was the last time he was ever they were ever really relevant, was literally 25 years ago. And fun fact, Cordell Stewart, Portia from Real Housewife of Atlanta's ex-husband.
I'm not there in
spoiler.
In
Atlanta.
I've been telling Bradley I've been watching Real Housewives of Atlanta. I'm only on season 4.
So that's a fun wrinkle.
It's amazing. I mean, Nene Leakes, she's an
icon.
Legend
of the Forum.
A star.
Legend of the Forum.
I love her forever. Anyway, we can do our Bravo podcast another time.
For the Patreon.
Yeah.
So this is really fascinating to me though, because it comes with so many cross-cultural currents beyond just a guy, which under any other circumstance, this is a relatively normal occurrence.
Mm-hmm.
An overperforming coach of a less heralded school and a less heralded conference gets a better job. Goes to a school with more resources, with more talent, more access to the recruiting pool and the transfer portal, things like that. But the difference is, like you said, this is the Hall of Famer, all-time athlete Deion Sanders, not only being a great coach, but also ostensibly trying to do this for a school and a conference, for historically black colleges and universities, almost in a way consciously making that, centering him, trying to elevate the conference, elevate these schools, and then basically
piecing
when the success comes, when the veneer of success comes, he immediately changes course, changes his tune, goes to a bigger program with more resources, and kind of begins to impose his will almost immediately just by virtue of his star power.
And he, of all of the coaches at HBCUs, could feasibly have the most principle to stand on. He's made a ton of money in his career, not just, as one of the greatest defensive players of all time in the history of the NFL, but through his broadcasting career and through endorsements. He's not hurting. So he, in theory, could have been somebody who could stay at Jackson State, as opposed to, say, if there was another overperforming coach who did not have his acumen, who you could understand maybe getting poached and going to a different school. And the problem is with, his elevations of HBCUs and then this contradiction is that unfortunately for HBCUs, it really was always about Deion. And he didn't do much systemically except to, yes, bring five-star recruits into his program, encourage NIL deals, that kind of thing. Got some donations for Jackson State. Yes, but that all was in his interests, right? What wouldn't have been in his interest, what would have been the principled thing to do would be to stay because he has the resources that other coaches at HBCUs do not. And why I did like what he was doing so much, one was because I want these college players to get paid. And he was essentially, even though it wasn't a good payment system going through NILs, still like fostering that as opposed to Nick Saban or other coaches who clearly hate that it undercuts their own power of recruiting. But what is frustrating is that college football, more than maybe any other sports institution in the country, is so structured around systemic racism that this like alternate path of HBCUs was really, really important. And having him as a face of that push was instrumental because, like, I've said this before, and not to use hyperbole, but sometimes these white college coaches act like they're managing. I don't want to go too far, but they are a very racist bunch. College football coaches.
Well, it's hard. It's hard.
They
to
like
avoid...
having power over black players. They like lording it over them. They don't pay them.
It's hard to avoid the comparisons of a very wealthy white person having a lot of power over either unpaid or underpaid black athletes.
And if they are getting paid, it's not from the college.
And usually if
they
are, they're getting they get punished for it. You know, Terrell Pryor or guys like that. Reggie
Bush got his Heisman taken away.
Heisman taken away for doing something that Dabo Swinney at Clemson wouldn't have been punished if he did the same thing.
No. It was and also you're a kid, people are throwing money at you and you're on top of the world. Of course you're going to accept favors or gifts or
sign an autograph.
Or sign an autograph. Exactly. As they profit off of you through ticket sales where you see none of it. And like I think that profession attracts systemically racist people. I think it attracts racist white college head coaches who want to be the king of the castle. They want to be judge, jury, and executioner. They have the final say about your career because you're not getting paid. You have no bargaining power. If you want to go to the NFL, you've committed to this school unless you want to transfer, and it might not work for you to transfer if you're a lower level recruit. You might still have some money and scholarship associated with the program. Like the head coach can determine the future of your career, and it's almost always white guys, Southern white guys at programs that have been historically exclusionary of black players. Then when it overtook the sport, have fought tooth and nail so those black players don't get paid, and like Deion's just joining that system.
And I think what is important to note is as you're saying is that what Deion Sanders is doing is not abnormal for the college coaching carousel, the way that college coaches build on their career.
Yeah.
But I think there was, because of how much he made his choice to coach at Jackson State about elevating HBCUs, trying to make HBCUs more of a talent pool for college football. I think if I'm a person who's in this SWAC, if I'm in that conference, if I'm one of his recruits to Jackson State, that while he's no longer there, unless he tries to poach all of them from
what he's doing
from Jackson State to Colorado,
which is also undercuts his like I'm pro HBCU argument because now he's going to take all the best players to go to Colorado with him,
which will then ultimately dilute the talent pool that he sought to build. Yeah. I can understand how it just rings hollow, and like you said, is just a continuation and a perpetuation of the entrenched system that's already there. And maybe it's too much to put on one guy, but I think if it was going to be one person, it would be someone who was independent.
Well, he actively sought it out,
wealthy, and had star power attached to his name, and um, was willing to use A and B to help kickstart this infrastructure.
Yeah.
I mean, Eddie Robinson Jr., who was the coach of Alabama State, he's a former player. He played against Sanders in the '90s. They had a bit of an altercation. It wasn't really an altercation. It's just he felt that Sanders was not being particularly respectful of him and his team. They played together. He thought he would just kind of have a little bit more there's a lot of decorum shit about when you're coaches. It's like, don't walk around my team while we're practicing. Like don't keep running plays when there's 40 seconds left and we have no timeouts and you're beating us by 2 touchdowns. Like all this like stupid like unwritten rule crap. Like I with all that being said, Sanders tried to give him a handshake and a hug afterwards, and Robinson kind of pushed away and walked away. And when he was asked about it after the game, he was basically just like, I've been here I've been in SWAC or around it my whole career, and he just parachutes in and says he's SWAC, he represents this conference, and he doesn't.
Yeah.
He doesn't represent us. I don't attach myself to that, and we're not friends, so I'm not going to act like we're friends. And like I understand that some people at that time, Jackson State was way more talented than Alabama State at that time. I understand people thought he was being a bit of a sore loser and kind of being a little bitter about maybe Sanders' success and everything like that. But at the same time, he wasn't completely wrong.
No, and look, it was good what Deion was doing. I mean, even if it's incredibly self-serving, it is helpful to have HBCUs elevated. But you can see when someone is not committed to something systemically, when they leave, it's just like, all right, peace.
And we'll see what happens in the sense that will Jackson State with another coach be able to continue attracting top-level talent without Deion Sanders?
Doubtful.
Will all of these recruits at Jackson State, as we just said, enter the transfer portal and join him in Colorado instead? And then what happens to the record of that school? What happens to the resources for that school? Like, what does Deion Sanders leaving mean for that conference and mean for that school in particular? I'm just curious to see what the literal pure cause and effect of this transaction, this decision does when the next college season rolls around.
Yeah, this is why this whole system needs to die. Like in the sense that, college athletes, like college football and college sports need to be a separate money-making entity with ironclad protections for their workers to get actually paid. We're taking a step towards that with the college football playoffs being more untethered from the NCAA, but it needs to be basically severed, in my opinion, because the system of exploitation of these student athletes when they're essentially semi-professionals already is it needs to die, and I want to kill it as soon as possible, especially because it's so inherently intertwined with frankly racist views of what black people are supposed to provide for people through their own labor.